Hi everyone, it's Katrina. Ever wondered how some of the most groundbreaking inventions and discoveries came to be? It turns out sometimes the greatest ideas aren't the result of meticulous planning or years of research. In fact, many of our most beloved technologies and scientific breakthroughs were stumbled upon by accident. Terrifying depths of ancient caves, random artifacts found while walking the dog, and prehistoric wonders hidden at the beach. These are just some of the incredible accidental discoveries that have been made by people just like you and me in today's video. The Cave City built by a queen. If you like wine, there is no better place to get it than the country of Georgia. They've been producing wine for 8,000 years or more. Do you know what else the people of Georgia have been doing for thousands of years? Living in underground caves. Now known as the Republic of Georgia, their territory has been home to some very dramatic episodes in human history. Thanks to their unique position in the Caucasus, in the middle between Europe and Asia, they have become a very diverse nation. They have experienced a tumultuous past, hosting, being conquered by, and ultimately freeing themselves from numerous civilizations. One of Georgia's most glorious golden ages began with the ruler Georgi III in 1156. His Bagratid dynasty propelled Georgia forward to become a major power, and everyone's pockets suddenly filled with gold. One of the best surviving examples of this golden age can be found on the slopes of the Erusheti mountain in the cave monastery of Vardzia. It is an impressive ruin carved from tufa rock and limestone. The kings of the Bagratid dynasty funded the development of the monastery. When legendary Queen Tamar the Great took power, she put even more money into carving churches out of the rock. Queen Tamar is considered one of the most powerful and influential female rulers in history. Tamar led her troops into battle on several occasions, securing significant victories against neighboring empires like the Byzantine Empire and the Seljuk Turks. Tamar's reign was a time of great prosperity and cultural flourishing for Georgia. Vardzia stands almost 4,000 feet above sea level and stretches nearly a mile along the cliffs. According to legend, there were originally more than 6,000 apartments hollowed into the mountainside. The 6,000 apartments were home to 2,000 monks, a large church, and even a throne room for visiting monarchs. Rumor has it that Vardzia's construction became so elaborate that it evolved from a peaceful monastery into a thriving underground city, hidden from the world and only accessible through a tunnel. The tunnel was only known to Queen Tamar and her closest circle. Then, in 1283, a devastating earthquake accidentally exposed the hidden city. As the mountainside crumbled, the city was left bare, like an ant nest that had been exposed by a lawnmower. It was the beginning of the end of Vardzia, since they couldn't hide anymore. It was less of an underground city and more of an open-air honeycomb after the earthquake. While it wasn't great since everything sort of collapsed, Vardzia was so large that locals still managed to use the caverns to hide from the Mongols when they invaded Georgia in the 1290s. Although hiding didn't do them much good. The Georgian kingdom was destroyed by the Mongol invasion. Then, hardly 3 centuries later, they were utterly annihilated by the Safavids, who had already captured Persia. In 1551, Vardzia was captured again, its residents slaughtered, and many of its ancient Christian relics were looted. Ancient texts and gospels estimated at more than 1,000 years old were sold in the black market. Today, you can still visit these ancient caves and try to imagine how people once lived. Don't let all the destruction stop you. Even though most of Queen Tamar's city was smashed to pieces, her main monastery is still standing, with over 242 rooms. Then there are the other spooky caves that can be found throughout Georgia, such as the Veryovkina Cave, considered the deepest cave on planet Earth. It is the Mariana Trench of caves, but most people don't even know it exists. The best dog walk ever. A boy took his dog for a walk and discovered something that he's going to remember for the rest of his life. He found the ancient Roman equivalent of a purple heart, a treasure that was likely given to a soldier who carried out a brave feat of valor. The boy, Rowan, was walking the family dog with his mom Amanda in the coastal village of Pagham when they made the discovery. Pagham is in West Sussex, England. It was 12-year-old Rowan who noticed the strangely bright piece of what seemed to be garbage sticking out of the ground. Rowan picked it up, realized it wasn't garbage, and stuffed it in his pocket. Rowan and his mother took the mysterious artifact to a local specialist. The specialist was associated with the Portable Antiquities Scheme. They are involved with managing and cataloging archaeological discoveries made by the public in the UK. When the analysis of the artifact came back, Rowan and his mother were shocked. They had discovered a sheet gold bracelet from the 1st century AD. It dates to just after Emperor Claudius invaded Britain in the year 43. It's hard to imagine Britain, once one of the biggest empires in the world, being invaded, but they were 2,000 years ago. Britain had been a land of warring tribes before the Romans came and took over. This piece of jewelry was likely worn by a man. It was probably given to that man as an award for bravery, as per a statement from the local Chichester District Council. The bracelet is insanely rare, not just because it's old either. It's rarer now because it was already rare 2,000 years ago. During the initial invasion of Britain, standout soldiers may have received this kind of military reward. But after a while, it became too expensive to hand out gold bracelets. Feats of valor were rewarded with money instead of jewelry. Relics like the one Rowan found by accident were only around for a limited time. In case you were wondering, Rowan did not get to keep the artifact. It was donated to the Novium Museum, where it went on display in early September 2024. And now for a quick break, because it's shoutout time! I want to give a big thank you to Master Zorgo and Cherie Graham for supporting this channel. Thanks so much! Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos about incredible discoveries. The greatest thrift find in history. A woman in Washington, D.C. hit the jackpot at a thrift store. And I don't mean that she found an awesome outfit at a great price. I mean she found actual treasure. She thought she'd purchased a quaint piece of art. In reality, Annalie Dozier bought a Mayan vase made 2,000 years ago in Mexico. Can you guess how much she paid for it? $3.99. You can barely get a cup of coffee for that much these days. Yet Anna bought an ancient Maya relic. Though to be fair, she had no idea. The artifact remained on display in her home for 5 years before she realized what she had in her possession. Anna travels a lot to Mexico for her job. When she was browsing the thrift store located near a U.S. Air Force base, the ceramic jar caught her eye because it obviously looked Mexican. She figured it was one of those trinkets that you can buy on the beach in Cancun. It was something a tourist had brought home, then it ended up at the thrift store. Anna was sort of right. Someone definitely brought it home from Mexico, but not a tourist from Cancun. Last January, when Anna was on yet another trip to Mexico, she was visiting the National Museum of Anthropology. As she looked at the ancient relics, something clicked. She realized the supposed trinket she had on her shelf was a cultural artifact. After some bureaucratic back and forth between Anna and the Mexican embassy, archaeologists began an investigation. Mexican experts identified her vessel as being made between 200 and 800 AD. It could be nearly 2,000 years old, dating to what's known as the Mayan Classic period. No one knows who made it or why. It seems to be an ordinary vessel, perhaps for holding water or oils. Anna packed the jar into a food delivery box, stuffed in some newspapers, and gave the artifact to the Mexican ambassador to the United States at the Mexican Cultural Institute in D.C. It was a small ceremony for a small artifact, but made one amazing story for Anna. And all just because she visited a thrift store on a whim. Let this be some motivation to get out there and thrift. The secret under the floor. After a few drinks, a family got curious about a bizarre metal rectangle in their house. What they found was so shocking that most people probably would have sold their house and moved out immediately. At the doorway of their home, just a few feet from the entrance, there was a large rectangular metal grate. It looked sort of like a heating grill that lets warm air into your house through the furnace. Only it was way too big to be that. It was about the size of a sewer grate. The family knew it was there, but never paid any attention to it. They put a welcome mat over it and forgot it was there. Then came a Good Friday celebration and a couple of drinks, as I already mentioned. The drinks were the catalyst for the family's curiosity. They decided to check out the grill and get to the bottom of what it was hiding. They'd already ignored it for 3 long years. It's important to note that the family's home was in Shropshire, England. The house they moved into 3 years before opening the grate was a detached Victorian-era building. The deeds to the house go back roughly 240 years. The family believed that their home started out as a public house, also known as a pub. At some point, the public house was transformed into a normal house. The thing in the basement was sealed underneath the floor. The only evidence it had ever been there was the mysterious metal grate. The metal grate creaked open and was put aside. The hole was big enough for Gareth and his uncle Matthew to squeeze through it. They lowered themselves down into the darkness, and it seemed as if they were inside an extremely large crawl space. That's not what it was, though. It wasn't a storage room, and it wasn't a cellar. Underneath the hole in the floor was a chapel. It was a spooky underground chapel with a gigantic wooden cross decaying on the floor and cracked concrete pews. In the middle of the room was an open chest. Inside were newspapers and bottles from the 1930s. The chapel appears to have been abandoned for almost a century. There were also meat hooks hanging from the ceiling. I don't care how many drinks you've had, a dark underground chapel with dangling meat hooks is terrifying. While not confirmed, the chamber beneath the family's house dates to the 1700s. Richard Westwood Brooks, a historical expert in the area, said it may have been a Catholic hideaway. In the 18th century, being Catholic wasn't easy. A room like this allowed Catholics to practice their faith without being persecuted and killed for it. These types of hideaways are known as priest holes. However, it's also possible that the chamber was built during World War II to be a bunker. According to Mr. Brooks, Winston Churchill established a secret army of men who were tasked with hiding in these types of underground chambers. They were hiding in case the Nazis won the war. These men were going to be moles, living underground until such a time that they could sabotage Nazi operations. Many of the men who stayed behind to be secret moles were ridiculed because they didn't go to the front lines with the other men. However, the ones who stayed in underground bunkers were still brave. They'd essentially signed their own death warrants. If England had been occupied by the Nazis, the moles' life expectancy would have been roughly 3 weeks. In all likelihood, their own neighbors would have probably told on them to keep the peace. But that still doesn't explain the cross and the pews. It does seem to have been a secret place for Catholics. Oh, and I should mention the ghost before I forget. The family claimed that shortly after discovering the underground chapel, they began experiencing paranormal activity. Gareth said they may have accidentally released a ghost or a spirit. What's the coolest thing you've ever found in your house by accident? Be sure to let me know in the comments. Dinosaurs on the beach. Imagine stumbling upon dinosaur footprints on a casual beach stroll. What's the deal with all of these kids finding amazing relics from the past? I'm jealous. A young girl going for a walk by the beach in Wales literally stumbled upon dinosaur footprints. And here I am just trying to find a neat shell or two, maybe a shark's tooth. Her name is Tegan, and she was with her mom Claire for a summer holiday stroll on the beach near the Vale of Glamorgan. The area is a known hotspot for prehistoric fossils. Still, most visitors don't walk away with dinosaur teeth. While mother and daughter combed the sand, something stuck out to Tegan. She noticed gigantic footprints of beasts that hadn't been around for 65 million years. They were spaced a little more than a foot away from each other, evidence of a prehistoric creature scampering down the seashore. Footprints are awesome to find, but not so easy to take home with you. Mom took some pictures, emailed the local museum, and heard back. Cindy Howells, the paleontology curator at the National Museum of Wales, identified the footprints as belonging to a long-necked dinosaur. It was probably a type of sauropodomorpha known as a camelotia. These dinosaurs were very distinct with really weird bodies. They had extraordinarily long tails, long necks, and plump torsos. The camelotia also had a really small head. It was like a tiny snake head on the end of its anaconda-sized neck. It measured about 16 feet long and was able to run on its hind legs or walk slowly on all fours. The footprints Tegan found were likely of the camelotia running on just its hind legs. It's amazing just to know that you're walking along the same path taken by a dinosaur hundreds of millions of years ago. Some people spent their whole lives trying to find just one dinosaur bone. Tegan found a whole set of tracks before she even hit 11. Congratulations! The Archaeological Badger. With help from a historic blizzard, a hungry badger turned into an archaeologist. It was the winter of 2021, and Spain had just gotten hammered by Storm Filomena. The blizzard blanketed Madrid in many feet of snow, which is very unusual for the Spanish city. The abnormal level of snow didn't just disrupt the humans in Spain, it confused the animals as well. Badgers were having a difficult time finding their food beneath all of that white powder. One struggling badger, let's name him Pepe, was desperate for something to eat. Pepe discovered a crack in the ceiling of La Cuesta cave. Beneath that crack was a treasure trove. The badger didn't discover any food, only a bunch of useless pieces of circular metal. It made a nest in the cave, littering its den with about 90 ancient coins, mostly Roman. When the snow cleared, the badger took off looking for more food. Local residents came across the trail of coins left behind by the disgruntled animal. It turns out that Pepe the Badger is a really good archaeologist. The coins it discovered are copper and bronze and were dated by human archaeologists to the 3rd and 5th centuries. The crazy part is that they didn't come from Spain. Most of them were minted in distant cities. Cities so far away, it's kind of astonishing that all of their coins ended up in this dank subterranean hole. Some of the coins were minted in Constantinople, others in Rome, London, Antioch, Lyon, and Thessaloniki. Archaeologists believe that someone hid the treasure in the cave in 409 AD, when Spain was invaded by the Germanic people known as the Suevi. Have you heard of the Goths or the Vandals? When it comes to the fall of the Roman Empire, those are the two most famous culprits. But they weren't the only Germanic groups around. In the 3rd century AD, the Germanic groups from Northern Europe, considered barbarians to the Romans, started to be a real issue. Nobody knows where the Goths came from before they came up against the Romans. Some have suggested it was Scandinavia. The first real record of the Goths is their invasion of Roman territories in 238. There was tension between Rome and the Goths, but it wasn't all bad. Some Goths adopted Roman ways, became soldiers for Rome, and traded with the Romans. Things remained relatively stable until 375. That was when the Huns appeared from the northeast of the Danube River. The Huns hated the Goths and the Romans. Their brutal invasion of Europe pushed the previously separate Goths and Vandals deeper into Roman territory, causing an inevitable clash of cultures. Spoiler alert, the Romans lost. In 410, Goth King Alaric laid siege to Rome. The city was burned, and his descendants, known as the Visigoths, took over the regions of Gaul and Iberia. The Visigoths ruled Spain until the Moors showed up in 711 and took it from them. In Italy, it was the Ostrogoths who took over the remnants of Rome, although they would be stamped out by the Byzantine Empire after only a few decades. Fun fact, the word vandal, meaning to vandalize something, comes from the Germanic Vandals. It comes from the fact that they burned and plundered Rome 45 years after the Goths did. Now getting back to Pepe the Badger's treasure. The Suevi was another group of Germanic people pushed into Rome's territory. They invaded Roman-controlled Spain the year before Rome burned at the hands of the Goths. Someone must have collected all of these coins, all 209 of them, and stashed them in La Cuesta cave. Maybe they were hoping to go back for their loot when the invaders left. Clearly, they never got the chance. The deepest cave in the world. Veryovkina Cave in Georgia was found largely by accident. The first known cavers stumbled upon it in 1968. Then it was lost and nobody found it again until 1982, when a spelunking group from Moscow uncovered the entrance. That spelunking club hit the cave jackpot. They continued exploring the new system, but only ever reached the deepest depth of 1,440 feet. For years, they continued their expeditions, making major breakthroughs each year. In 2016, they made a major jump down to 2,070 feet. Then later that year, they reached 3,310 feet, and finally, at the end of 2016, they reached 4,430 feet. It was the expedition in 2017 that brought cavers to 7,231 feet below the surface of the Earth, setting a new world record. Veryovkina Cave officially became the deepest sub-horizontal passage reachable without diving equipment. This is the lowest point you can go without strapping an oxygen tank to your back. In 2021, cavers discovered something horrifying at a depth of 3,600 feet. They stumbled upon a body. It had been there for a while. No, it wasn't an alien body or a monster's corpse, though that would be exciting. It turned out to be the remains of Sergei Kosev, who left his home in Russia in November 2020 to explore the world's deepest cave by himself. Sergei Kosev, may he rest in peace, went down to a depth of 2,000 feet and made himself a permanent camp. And he did it alone. I imagine it's about 10 times scarier than camping alone in the woods. Sergei spent a week in that camp, then, driven by his thirst for adventure, continued his descent into the more challenging depths. He reached 3,600 feet before getting stuck, and there, tragically, he died of hypothermia. As of August 2023, the official cave depth is 7,293 feet. There appears to be water at the deepest part, which means the cave could descend even deeper. Explorers will need special equipment and breathing apparatuses to keep going. If ever there was a gateway to hell, this might be it. New discoveries at Colonial Williamsburg. The discoveries just keep coming at Colonial Williamsburg. When crews were constructing a new archaeology center, they stumbled upon actual archaeological ruins. They found the foundations of a mysterious structure and some artifacts. Let me give you a bit of background on Colonial Williamsburg, just in case. It is the restored area of Williamsburg in the state of Virginia, which was originally founded in the early 17th century. What you see today is a fully reconstructed version of the original capital of the English colony. The town was built before America was America and became the center of political activity in the days just before the American Revolution. Williamsburg was founded in 1632, made the capital in 1698, and given a royal charter in 1722. It was here where famous American heroes like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson had debates on everything from slavery to taxes. The reconstruction project has been going on since the 1930s. It might surprise you to know that the Rockefeller family has largely been behind the funding. The story is more interesting than it has any right to be. Reverend William Archer Rutherford Godwin, a man who you might say had too many names, started raising funds for the town's restoration in 1907. In 1924, he approached famous oil tycoon John Rockefeller. Rockefeller agreed to help fund the plan, and then they worked together in secrecy to see it done. The pair covertly purchased rundown and dilapidated properties across Williamsburg. They communicated through coded telegrams, and the secrecy was because they didn't want locals to find out what they were doing. If they had, the locals could have raised the prices of their homes to try and cash in on the restoration. For being billionaires, they were pretty cheap. Archaeologists are still working on Colonial Williamsburg right now. They are constantly doing some kind of archaeological work. Most recently, they started to build a new archaeology center on what had been a parking lot since the 1960s. When they began digging, they realized the parking lot had been built over the ruins of a very old building. They don't know what the building was. So far, experts have discovered a brick foundation, which includes a cellar and a small well. That's pretty much it. They suspect the building was constructed around the 1720s. Researchers found some weird stuff too. Jack Gary, the executive director of archaeology, said the team found wig curlers, a silver teaspoon, foreign ceramics, and glass window panes. I mean, the wig curlers stand out. Researchers think the artifacts point to whoever owned the structure being very wealthy. You had to be seriously rich to own wig curlers. This new accidental discovery is only one recent find at Colonial Williamsburg. Earlier in the year 2024, archaeologists uncovered a military barracks used during the Revolutionary War. They also found horseshoes and pieces of jewelry from an officer's cufflinks. The Cauldron and the Witches. Spooky season is almost upon us, and there is nothing better than witches and spells this time of year. A 1,500-year-old burial complex was discovered by accident in Germany, but that wasn't that strange. It's what was inside the complex that was strange. Within the complex was a bronze cauldron and the skeletons of 6 women. It's weird, right? This sounds like the remains of a witchcraft ritual gone terribly wrong. The bronze cauldron was found at the very center of the complex, with the graves of 6 women encircling it. This was all done on purpose in a very particular way. Things get creepier still. The burial complex belonged to an elite Germanic lord, and it was found during the construction of a new chicken farm. I think we need to get to the bottom of this right now. Archaeologists were saying the tomb was likely dedicated to a local lord of high status. This was someone who lived around the beginning of the 5th century, in the same age as folk heroes like King Arthur. There was other stuff discovered in the Germanic lord's tomb, which, by the way, is in the state of Saxony-Anhalt. Researchers identified several dogs, some cattle, and approximately 11 horses. There was also a small cache of gold and silver objects. Scattered near the tomb are between 40 and 60 less extravagant graves. It's as if they were all buried around this one significant person. Right now, everything about the discovery is a mystery. Researchers don't know who the Lord was, and they haven't come up with the identities of the 6 women either. One theory is that the women were concubines of the Lord. Another theory is that they were sacrificed against their will as part of a bizarre death ritual. Maybe the Lord was a necromancer. The women may have also been sacrificed voluntarily, hoping to accompany their dearly departed master into the afterlife. A final theory is that the women were witches. The cauldron at the center of the tomb was used as part of their secret craft. Perhaps they died during an epic black mass, or something just as diabolical. The Accidental Rhino. In Russia, a group of miners were looking for gold when they discovered something I would say is even better. They found the remains of a prehistoric beast instead. The specimen they found is one of only 5, making it hugely valuable and incredibly rare. The rhino in question hails from the Ice Age. It stood over 6 feet tall and stretched 16 feet long. It used to roam across the snowy tundra in places like Asia, Europe, and Africa. It also used to live alongside humans, up until the creature went extinct 12,000 years ago. I should also mention that they were pretty fuzzy. It's hard to imagine a rhino covered in shaggy hair stomping through the snow, but that used to be a thing. Woolly rhinos exist, albeit these days only as mummified bodies. The Russian miners found their rare specimen in the Sakha Republic, which is way out in Siberia. Local researcher Maxim Cheprasov said this is the first such discovery made in the area. It is a full carcass of a woolly rhinoceros with its soft tissue still intact. It isn't just a mummy. This deceased beast still has its fur, its skin, and its soft organs. Researchers say that judging by the size of its rear frontal horn, it was a mature rhino. They're hoping to eventually compare the genes of the animal to the other 4 specimens. Finding genetic links between woolly rhinos could bring them one step closer to resurrection. Scientists still need to figure out what these animals ate, if they were infected by viruses, and other things like that. If scientists are ever able to bring back the woolly mammoth like they keep promising, the woolly rhino could be next. The bashing weapon in the strawberry patch. A tool was discovered in a Canadian strawberry patch totally by accident, giving a glimpse into the ancient past of Saskatoon. The tool is known as a grooved maul, a type of bludgeoning instrument that could be used for processing animals or processing your enemies. Most people wouldn't even know that they had just discovered an ancient tool if they found this object. The grooved maul is nothing more than a piece of granite the size of a fist. It has one groove going all the way around it, a little bit of wear on one end, but otherwise looks like an ordinary rock. Karen Stuber with the Saskatchewan Archaeological Society said it was likely attached to a handle. A Native American used the maul like a hammer. And although I described it as nothing more than a rock, this wasn't something you could have sat down and made in a couple of minutes. The mall took a lot of work to create. Somebody put a massive amount of time into shaping the stone into a hammer and then lashing it to a handle. The amount of wear on one end shows that it was used a lot. This was someone's trusty tool, likely carried with them everywhere. Karen said this exact type of artifact is hiding underneath the surface of gardens, yards, and city parks all over the place. The whole city of Saskatoon is an archaeological site. The problem is that people don't know what to look for, so a lot of ancient artifacts end up sitting in strawberry patches unrecognized. As for its age, what do you think? Karen said humans have been using this exact type of tool for more than 10,000 years. But nobody knows exactly how old this particular one is. It could have been made more than 8,000 years ago, then picked up by someone 3,000 years later and used again. In any case, there's no real way of knowing.
Thanks for watching! Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed. The neighboring galaxy. An accidental discovery from the Hubble telescope has revealed a new galaxy right beside the Milky Way. The Hubble telescope, which has been orbiting Earth for almost 30 consecutive years, was checking out our cosmic neighborhood, inspecting a globular star cluster named NGC 6752. It's about 13,000 light-years away inside the halo of our own private galaxy. That was when the telescope was photobombed by a totally unknown galaxy right beside us. Star cluster NGC 6752 resides in the constellation Babel, the Peacock. It's the third brightest cluster visible to us after Omega Centauri and 47 Tucanae. Astronomers were trying to hunt down white dwarf stars to age NGC 6752 when they discovered Bedin 1 completely by mistake. It turns out that Bedin 1 is a spheroidal galaxy that's 13 billion years old and has a maximum of several billion stars within it. What's truly fascinating is that our new neighbor only measures about 3,000 light-years at its greatest extent. That's only 1/30th of the diameter of our Milky Way. But it's not our only cosmic neighbor. Scientists have already identified at least 36 dwarf spheroidal galaxies inside of our local group. The local group itself is made up of 54 different galaxies, with the Milky Way being just one. According to the report in Forbes magazine, Bedin 1 is 30 million light-years from us, or 2,300 times as far as the star cluster NGC 6752. New blue. A few years ago, a group of chemists accidentally created a unique blue pigment for the first time in over 200 years. If this sounds silly, it's really not. These chemists basically cooked up a new color, a unique brilliant blue that they nicknamed Yinmin. It took 10 years for it to be approved for commercial use by the U.S. Toxic Substances Control Act. In 2020, the new and accidental pigment finally became available to art suppliers and is currently one of the rarest colors of paint in the world. One shop was reported to be selling the new blue at $179.40 for 40 milliliters. That's less volume than a shot of tequila. This new blue color is so special that Crayola announced in 2017 that they would replace their retired dandelion yellow color with a new crayon inspired by the color of Yinmin blue, though they couldn't actually afford to use the real pigment. The pigment was made by scientists at Oregon State University while they were investigating materials to be used in electronic applications. Graduate student Andrew Smith was trying to make a type of electronic material by heating manganese oxide to 2,100 degrees Fahrenheit when he noticed a strange blue compound had suddenly appeared in the furnace. Besides this amazing color it makes, it is a very stable compound that doesn't react when heated or cooled, or mixed with water or acid. Surprisingly, other blues cause problems. Cobalt blue is known to be carcinogenic, and Prussian blue can release cyanide. But this new blue appears to be safe. Since the happy accident occurred, the team has now made other durable colors such as yellow, orange, green, and purple by using similar chemistry. They are now on the lookout to make a safe and durable red pigment. Storage unit Jackpot. Art dealer David Killen recently purchased a collection of abandoned artworks from a storage unit in New Jersey and made an incredible accidental discovery. This New York art dealer purchased the contents of the abandoned storage unit for $15,000. But these things are always a mystery. You buy the unit, but you don't know what's in there. Most of the time, it's a bunch of junk. When he made the purchase, he wasn't sure he'd ever get his money back. Little did he know, there were 6 unknown paintings by famous artist Willem de Kooning. The unit also contained unclaimed work from an art conservator named Orrin Riley, who died in 1986. When David purchased the 200 seemingly worthless art pieces, he thought they would be minor works by minor artists. He was actually planning to use them as filler in his gallery. Happily for David, this storage unit really paid off. The former assistant to Willem de Kooning told the New York Post that he believes the 6 paintings are definitely authentic, probably from the 1970s. This is big news considering a small painting by Kooning recently sold for over $4.2 million at auction. But the total auction record for Kooning stands currently at $66.3 million. This means that if the paintings are authenticated and David puts them up for sale, his accidental discovery could net him millions and millions of dollars. That would be a very lucrative investment on his part. Have you ever found anything cool in storage? Maybe your grandmother's attic or something? Let me know in the comments below. The Colossus of Ramsey II. Archaeologists working in Egypt recently discovered a giant statue submerged underneath groundwater inside of a slum in Cairo completely by accident. The experts are saying the statue probably depicts the ancient pharaoh Ramses II, who reigned over Egypt 3,000 years ago. The random discovery has been praised by the Egyptian Antiquities Ministry as one of the most important in recent memory. The statue was found near the ruins of Ramses II's broken temple in the old city of Heliopolis, on the outskirts of Cairo. Ramses II was one of the most powerful rulers of the ancient Egyptian kingdom. He ruled from between 1279 and 1213 BC and led several successful military expeditions, including marching the Egyptian army into Nubia and Syria. So far, the researchers have discovered the head and torso. News crews and curious locals looked on as archaeologists pulled the enormous head out of the water using a forklift. And nearby, the team found a limestone statue depicting Ramses II's grandson, Pharaoh Seti II. The main reason archaeologists are positive that the statue depicts Ramses II is that the Sun Temple in Heliopolis was founded by the man himself. At the time, it was one of the largest temples in the entire nation. The Sun Temple in Heliopolis was nearly double the size of the famous Karnak Temple in Luxor, but like many ancient wonders, it was destroyed during the Greco-Roman occupation of Egypt. Most of its obelisks were moved, many of the goods were stolen and taken to Europe, and many of the building's supplies were scrapped and reused to help build Cairo. Fossilized vampire squid. An expert team of paleontologists working in Prague discovered a mysterious remnant from a lost time in the ocean's history. They surprisingly came across a fossil of a vampire squid that dates back 30 million years. What's really crazy is that vampire squid still exist today. They are a crimson color and have webbing that attaches all of their appendages, making them look like squid vampires in red capes. The team made the discovery while combing through an old fossil collection at the Hungarian National History Museum. They came upon an old imprint of a fossil found in 1942 by a Hungarian paleontologist. He had discovered the vampire squid, cataloged the find, and then everyone had forgotten about it. Because the vampire squid was found free of microfossils, experts today know that the animal was definitely living in deep waters. This is important because it shows that the vampire squid had already evolved and was thriving in deep oceans between 34 and 23 million years ago. Scientists still don't know exactly when the vampire squid first evolved to live in the ocean, but they believe they made their way from shallower waters into the depths of the world's oceans around 150 million years ago, which explains how they managed to avoid ever going extinct. Classic Car Mania. An urban explorer came across the find of a lifetime when he discovered a rare and very valuable collection of vintage prototype cars that have been estimated to be worth upwards of $1 million. The urban explorer identified himself only as Ben, and he'd apparently known about the secret complex full of unknown treasures for years before he and a friend decided to make their way into the property and see what was in store. What they found was a prototype Bristol Bullet, a Bentley Continental Flying Spur, and even a 1957 Beardmore taxi. All of this stuff hidden inside of a turreted complex with boarded-up windows and unkempt, overgrown grounds. The explorers had no idea they would find such valuable vehicles. The Bristol Bullet was designed as a 70th anniversary prototype model but was never sold and is worth at least $250,000. The 2008 Bentley Continental Flying Spur is worth around $20,000, while the 1964 Bristol 409 Bullet Speedster goes for around $300,000. The speedster was crafted as a testing prototype and never made it to market. According to Ben, the explorer who found all this stuff, he had no idea what he was getting into when he and his friend broke into the building. They thought it was just an ordinary abandoned warehouse, maybe with a few ghosts and a bit of junk. The building was owned by Bristol Cars, the last independent British car manufacturer in the entire country. They went bust during the COVID lockdown and must have left behind some treasures by accident. And now for number 4, but first, it's shout-out time! Want to say a big thank you to Reese Watts and Jad Ars. Thanks so much for joining us, and if you are new here, be sure to hit that subscribe button. We have tons more videos about new discoveries coming up. Antarctic Sponges. The discovery of Arctic sponges underneath the ice shelf in Antarctica has scientists pretty confused. These Arctic sponges are strange life forms that were found totally by accident on a boulder beneath the ice. The area that floats beneath the Antarctic ice shelves is one of the least known habitats on our planet. The only way to see what's happening beneath the ice is to drill a massive borehole and lower in a camera. Researchers were drilling almost 3,000 feet through the ice and found life forms attached to rocks, living in utter darkness thousands of feet beneath solid ice in sub-zero temperatures. How had these creatures managed to survive? While they are not exactly fish or lobsters, sponges are filter feeders that don't really move around, making it even more surprising that they are getting enough nutrients to survive down there. According to marine biologist Hugh Griffiths, it was a genuine surprise to discover animals living in such an extreme location. This is because things like sponges were previously thought unable to live in a place so far from sunlight with absolutely no obvious source of food. But clearly that's not the case. The sponges discovered have probably adapted to living in these harsh conditions through thousands of years of evolution and are likely able to live for a long time without having to eat. However, scientists and biologists alike are still boggled by how exactly any life form can thrive encased in ice. A new throat organ. Despite all we think we know about human anatomy, scientists literally discovered a new organ just this year completely by accident. Researchers at the Netherlands Cancer Institute were using special scanning techniques to investigate a patient and found a new set of salivary glands in the upper part of the throat that they hadn't known about before. The scientists then used the same scanning techniques to look at 100 additional patients. These new glands were found in the nasopharynx region, positioned behind the nose. Previous to the discovery, scientists thought that the region was pretty much empty, but they have now discovered what they are calling tubercle salivary glands hiding underneath a piece of cartilage. They also dissected 2 cadavers to further confirm the discovery. From what scientists can figure out so far, these newly found glands probably work to lubricate the upper throat just behind the nose and mouth. This newest discovery was published in the journal Radiotherapy and Oncology. It's kind of surprising that nobody knew this was here, right? With all the nasal issues and reconstructive surgeries and plastic surgeries, it took new technology to discover this new organ in the throat. A creepy ghost town. When TikTok users were exploring rural Missouri, they stumbled upon one of the creepiest ghost towns in all of the United States. A girl shared her discovery of a subdivision full of creepy abandoned mansions known as the Indian Ridge Resort. This place was supposed to be a luxurious neighborhood with a building cost of around $1.6 billion. The developers were going to build a shopping mall, a golf course, a museum, and one of the largest indoor water parks in the world. But none of this stuff ever got off the ground. A few of the giant mansions were partially built, but nobody ever moved into them. Construction stopped by 2009 after the financial crisis, and the entire area has since been forgotten. Most people don't even know it's there, which made the poor TikTok user's discovery so much more horrifying for her and her friends. The mansions are now crumbling, haunting, and not very welcoming. And it doesn't help that they were built in the middle of a foggy forest. The girl was pretty scared, but she had a blast sharing it. As far as we know, there are no current plans to demolish the creepy abandoned mansions, so they should definitely be around if you want to find them on your next trip to Missouri. A lost forest. Archaeologists were recently shocked when they discovered an ancient forest completely by accident off the coast of Wales. The United Kingdom has experienced a series of strong storms. The worst was probably Storm Francis. When Francis smashed into Wales, the gale force winds blew away parts of the beach, revealing an ancient forest that had been buried in the sand for roughly 4,500 years. Carbon dating placed the forest as being alive in 1500 BC. But what's really fascinating is that the ancient forest buried under the sand may have something to do with the 17th century legend of a lost civilization swallowed by the sea, known as the Sunken Hundred. The legend of the Sunken Hundred states that a once powerful kingdom occupied the land where this ancient forest once thrived, before being flooded and turned into a beach. The land was flooded because one of the princes in charge of the city forgot to close the floodgates and allowed the entire area to be swallowed by seawater. Unfortunately, there has never been any archaeological evidence to prove this Welsh version of Atlantis ever existed, but these newly found trees do suggest that the area was definitely full of greenery before some kind of geological event caused the sea levels to rise. Thanks for watching! What's the wildest discovery you've ever made by accident? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. See you soon! Bye!